In the spotlight's glow, I find my tonight. Let the music flow, I'm holding tight.
The theater fell silent the moment he stepped under the lights. No one expected much, until he opened his mouth. In just seconds, the room froze, the judges stopped breathing, and a voice no one thought possible echoed through the stage. What happened next shocked everyone. Backstage at America's Got Talent was its usual mix of chaos and electricity. Performers stretching, dancers rehearsing steps, singers humming scales, stagehands weaving between cables and cameras. But in one small corner, away from the noise and ego and nerves, a quiet stillness existed. Rico stood there with his hands in his pockets, eyes lowered, breathing in slow, steady rhythms. He wasn't trying to warm up or impress anyone. He wasn't rehearsing lines or pacing like most contestants did. He was simply existing, trying to hold himself together before stepping into the brightest spotlight of his life. He could still hear his Lolo's voice in his head, deep, warm, a little raspy from late-night singing sessions. If you ever get scared, Anak, remember this. Elvis never sang to be famous. He sang because he felt something. Rico closed his eyes and let the memory settle in his chest. That was his anchor tonight. A backstage producer, holding a clipboard and a headset, approached him. She slowed down the moment she saw his calm demeanor. Most teens she met were jittery, full of adrenaline and panic. But Rico, he looked like someone holding on to a quiet story. "Hey," she said softly, "can we get your name and age?" He looked up, giving a small, polite smile. "I'm Rico, 17. She nodded, but she sensed there was something else, something unspoken behind his steady eyes. "And what brings you to AG today?" For a moment, Rico swallowed hard. He was trying to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. The producer waited patiently. "My Lolo," he finally said. "He raised me. Every night he played Elvis vinyl records. He always told me, one day you'll sing on a big stage. He passed away last year. Tonight, I want to sing the song he played the most." The producer's face softened. "That's beautiful," she whispered, then signaled the stage assistant. "He's next." As Rico followed the assistant through the narrow hallway, his heartbeat picked up speed. He heard muffled cheers from the audience, the kind of cheers that belonged to dreams he never imagined reaching. The hallway opened to the massive golden doors leading to the stage. Their surface shimmered under the lights, reflecting a distorted version of his nervous face. The assistant placed a hand on his shoulder. "Deep breath. When the doors open, walk straight to the X on the floor. The judges will take it from there." Rico nodded slowly, though his pulse pounded like drums in his ears. He closed his eyes one last time, whispered, "For you, Lolo," and exhaled. The golden doors began to part, bright white stage lights spilling in like sunlight bursting into a dark room. The sound of thousands of people hit him instantly. A wave of excitement, chatter, anticipation. He stepped forward, and for a second, he couldn't move. The sheer size of the theater overwhelmed him. It was enormous, glowing, alive. The audience quieted a little as they realized someone new, someone young, small, and almost fragile-looking, was walking onto the stage. Rico took the few steps to center stage. Stopping on the 10th, he gripped the microphone stand lightly. His palms were sweaty, but his expression stayed calm, composed. Simon Cowell leaned forward, studying him with that familiar mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Hello," Simon said. "Who are you?" "Rico," he answered softly. "I'm from the Philippines." The audience erupted into cheers at the mention of the Philippines. Rico smiled faintly, encouraged but still nervous. "And what will you be singing?" Simon asked. Rico held the microphone closer. "A song from the King," he said, his voice barely above a whisper but firm enough to be heard. The crowd reacted again, some cheering, others gasping with excitement. Elvis songs were iconic, hard, sacred, not something taken lightly. Simon raised one eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "All right, Rico," he said, "let's hear it." The lights around the stage slowly faded until only a single spotlight landed on Rico. The band was silent. Camera zoomed in. The theater fell into the kind of hush usually reserved for sacred moments. Then the soft, nostalgic strum of an acoustic guitar drifted through the room, a classic Elvis intro that instantly pulled everyone into another era. Rico could feel the music vibrating through the floor, up his spine, into his chest where the memory of his Lolo rested. He tightened his grip on the mic. He took one slow breath, and then he opened his mouth and released the very first note. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't forced. It was soft, smooth, and impossibly close to the warm, velvety tone that defined a legend. The sound carried like a ribbon of gold through the silent theater, floating up into the rafters and settling into the hearts of every person in the room. The audience gasped. An immediate collective inhale. Heidi's hand flew to her mouth. Sophia's eyes widened. Howie leaned forward, and Simon froze completely, staring at the boy on stage like he had just witnessed something from another world. Rico didn't notice any of it. He was somewhere else now, in the tiny living room of his childhood home, sitting beside his Lolo, listening to records spin under the warm glow of an old lamp. His voice, steady and tender, filled the theater. And just seconds into the performance, everyone watching knew something extraordinary was about to unfold. The moment Rico released his first note, something impossible happened. The massive AGT theater, usually loud, restless, charged, fell into a breathless stillness. It was as if the air itself had frozen. The sound of his voice, warm and hauntingly familiar, drifted across the room with a depth no one expected from a 17-year-old boy. It wasn't an imitation. It wasn't a gimmick. His tone held the unmistakable soul of Elvis, but also something new, something fragile, human, and heartbreakingly honest. For the first few seconds, the judges didn't even exchange glances. They were too stunned. Heidi, who always reacted quickly, needed a full heartbeat before her mouth slowly fell open, eyes widening like she was witnessing a ghost take the stage. Sophia gripped the edge of the judge's desk, leaning closer as if afraid the moment would slip away if she blinked. Howie squinted, almost disbelieving what he was hearing. But it was Simon's reaction that set the tone for the entire audience. He didn't blink, he didn't smirk, he didn't even move. He stared at Rico with an intensity reserved for the rarest performers, the ones who arrive once in a generation. On stage, Rico continued singing, unaware of the shockwave he had unleashed. Each lyric rolled effortlessly from his lips, the vibrato steady, the phrasing uncannily clean. The richness of his low note sent shivers through the theater. When he transitioned to the first gentle high note, his voice lifted with a velvety smoothness that made people clutch their chests in disbelief. The audience began reacting before they could stop themselves. Gasps, whispers, the shifting of bodies leaning forward, trying to get closer to the sound. A few people in the front row stood up without realizing they'd risen. Cell phones lifted slowly into the air, not to record but to capture proof that the moment was real. Halfway through the first verse, Howie turned his head slightly toward the other judges and whispered, almost breathless, "Are you hearing this?" Heidi didn't turn away from the stage. "He sounds unreal, like he's channeling something." Sophia nodded without speaking, her eyes glistening slightly. But Simon still hadn't reacted. He sat completely still, jaw clenched, eyes locked on Rico as if studying every detail. The posture, the breathing, the tone, the emotion, the musicality. Simon had built a career discovering voices, but even he looked confused and deeply moved. Meanwhile, Rico was beginning to lose himself in the music. With each line, he grew more confident. His shoulders relaxed. The slight tremble in his hands disappeared. The memory of his Lolo guiding him through evening rehearsals filled the back of his mind. He wasn't performing for fame or judges or cameras. He was singing for the person who taught him what music meant. He reached the pre-chorus, where the melody climbed for the first time. The crowd sensed it coming. The energy shifted, tightening, building like the world was holding its breath. Then Rico hit the note, not with force, not with showmanship, but with a softness so controlled it felt like a secret spoken into the dark. The audience erupted. It wasn't polite applause, it wasn't encouragement, it was a spontaneous wave of emotion. Cheers, shouts, people standing, hands flying into the air. The noise echoed across the theater and crawled up the walls like lightning. Rico's eyes widened briefly, startled, but he didn't break. He closed them again, smiled, and kept singing. By the time he reached the chorus, the entire room was vibrating with energy. His voice soared effortlessly, carrying the spirit of Elvis, but infused with a youthful vulnerability that made the song feel brand new. Each note was a revelation. Raw, polished, powerful, and impossibly genuine. The judges could no longer contain themselves. Sophia turned to Heidi, whispering fiercely, This is one of the best things I've ever heard on this stage. Howie nodded repeatedly, stunned. He's more than a tribute. He's different. Heidi's eyes were shining. This is magic. But still, Simon hadn't spoken, hadn't reacted, hadn't moved. His expression wasn't stone-faced skepticism anymore. It was disbelief. Awe. A rare vulnerability flickered across his face, though he tried to mask it. As Rico approached the final chorus, something extraordinary happened. The audience rose to their feet again, mid-performance, not waiting for permission or the final note. A full standing ovation, erupting before the last note even arrived. The chant started slowly from the back rows. Go, 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 go! People near the front picked it up. It spread like wildfire through the entire theater. Rico heard it. His breath hitched. His eyes glistened. This was the moment his Lolo had imagined for him. And now it was real. With new emotions swelling inside him, Rico delivered the final line. His last note wasn't loud. It was controlled, silky, and aching with sincerity. It hung in the air like a final heartbeat. The music cut. The lights dimmed. Silence fell. One soft, stunned second, before the theater exploded with the loudest eruption of applause the venue had heard all season. Rico lowered the microphone, chest rising and falling, trying to process the moment. He covered his mouth, overwhelmed. Tears gathered at the corners of his eyes. The audience screamed, stomped, clapped, everyone on their feet. Heidi jumped up, clapping wildly. Sophia waved her hands in excitement. Howie shouted, "That's a superstar!" And Simon finally blinked. Then he slowly, deliberately stood up. For the judges and audience of AGT, that single movement said everything. Rico hadn't just impressed them. He had frozen the judges, shaken the room, and delivered a once-in-a-lifetime voice that none of them would forget. For a long moment after Rico's final note faded into the rafters, the theater pulsed with stunned silence, an impossible silence for a venue packed with thousands. Then, like a dam breaking, the entire room erupted into a tidal wave of applause and cheers. People were screaming his name, stomping their feet, waving their hands in disbelief. The energy was raw, electric, almost chaotic. Rico stood on stage, trembling. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes shiny with unshed tears. The spotlight reflected off the gold accents on the stage floor, making the air look like it was sparkling. He wasn't sure if the thunderous roar reaching his ears was real or something he had imagined, but then he looked up and saw every single person in the room on their feet. Sophia clapped wildly, her long hair bouncing with every movement. Heidi's hands were clasped over her heart, as if she were trying to keep it from bursting. Howie pointed both fingers toward Rico, shaking his head with the wide-eyed disbelief of someone who had just witnessed magic. But all attention shifted to Simon. He had risen to his feet slower than the others. Now he stood still, hands resting lightly on the judge's desk, looking straight at Rico like he was studying a miracle up close. His expression wasn't the usual smirk or poker face. It was soft, almost emotional, something so rare from him it startled the crowd. Rico swallowed hard, gripping the microphone like it was the only thing keeping him standing. Simon finally leaned forward, pressing the talk button on the desk microphone. The room immediately fell silent, as if everyone knew this would be a moment they'd never forget. "Rico," Simon said, his voice steady but filled with something deeper. "I don't know how to say this in a way that does your performance justice." Rico blinked rapidly. Simon continued, "What you just did, on this stage at 17 years old, was one of the best Elvis vocals I have ever heard. And I'm not talking about AGT. I mean anywhere." The crowd exploded again, cheers rising so loud the stage floor vibrated. Rico's breath caught. He lowered his head, overwhelmed. His fingers bled, as he held the mic close to his chest. Heidi took her turn next. "Your voice is a gift, Rico. You didn't just sound like Elvis. You carried emotion, honesty, and something uniquely yours. It felt like you weren't performing, you were remembering someone, and we all felt that." Rico smiled softly, blinking back tears. The mention of his Lolo warmed his heart. Howie leaned forward with excitement. "You shocked the entire room in seconds, Rico. Seconds. I don't think I've seen an audience react this fast in years. You have the tone, the control, the presence. This is what AGT is about." Sophia nodded so hard her earrings shimmered. "You're a superstar, Rico. You didn't copy Elvis, you revived him, but with your own heart. That's what made this unforgettable." The audience started chanting again, louder this time. "Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer! Golden buzzer!" The chant rolled through the theater like a wave, louder with each repetition. Rico's mother, who had been backstage, stepped out at the edge of the curtains with a hand over her mouth, watching her son with teary eyes. Rico stared at the judges in disbelief. His throat tightened. He couldn't speak even if he wanted to. All he could do was stand there, absorbing the chants, the cheers, the hope swelling inside him. Simon looked down at the golden buzzer button. The audience roared. Sophia laughed nervously, leaning toward him. "Simon, don't tease him!" Heidi slapped her hands on the desk. "Do it!" Howie pointed at Simon dramatically. "There's only one thing to do!" Simon looked at Rico again. The boy stood under the spotlight, cheeks flushed, tears finally slipping down. He looked small, humble, but somehow larger than the entire stage. Simon exhaled slowly. "Rico," he said, "this isn't just good." Rico inhaled sharply. Simon pressed his palm to the golden buzzer. "This is legendary." The moment his hand slammed the buzzer, the entire world seemed to explode. A metallic thunder hit the air as golden confetti cannons burst open from the ceiling. A storm of shimmering gold fell in slow motion, thousands of pieces swirling like a golden blizzard. The lights flared into golden beams, turning the stage into a glowing dream. Rico gasped and dropped to his knees. Tears streamed down his cheeks as confetti stuck to his hair, his jacket, his eyelashes. He covered his face with his hands. He could hear people screaming, crying, cheering. His mother ran onto the stage, rushing to him with open arms. She knelt beside him, pulling him into a tight embrace. "You did it," she whispered through her tears. "Your Lolo is proud, Anak." Rico sobbed against her shoulder, overwhelmed by the moment. Gold continued to rain down, swirling around them like blessings from above. Simon watched with a rare, warm smile. Heidi wiped tears from her eyes. Sophia blew kisses toward Rico. Howie clapped as hard as he could. Camera operators circled the stage, capturing the moment from every angle. The confetti storm, the shining lights, the emotional reunion between mother and son, the cheering crowd that refused to sit down. It wasn't just a golden buzzer moment. It was the kind of performance that would be replayed, shared, and remembered for years. A moment where a shy Filipino teen walked onto the stage with nothing but a dream and walked off as a legend in the making. And as the last pieces of gold floated gently to the floor, Rico lifted his tearful eyes to the sky, whispering only one word: Lolo. In that beautiful golden moment, the world felt it with him.